Hey there, writers! This is Kristen Kieffer, and you are listening to the Well-Storied podcast, where I translate articles from the Well-Storied blog into audio so you can listen in on the go. Today I am on the blog with a brand new article for you guys called How to Encourage Readers to Invest in Your Story by Crafting Relatable Characters. And so I don't really have any ado to share here at the beginning of today's episode. We are going to dive right in. If you would like to read along as you listen in today, make sure to head on over to well-storied.com/relatable. And I will leave that link for you in today's episode description. How to encourage readers to invest in your story by crafting relatable characters. We want readers to connect with our characters, to step inside their shoes and invest in their journeys. But creating that easy connection between reader and character isn't always a clear-cut process. Do our characters need to be, in some way, relatable for readers to connect with their stories? In my opinion, yes, but perhaps not in the way you might think. Today, writer, we're cutting through the chaos and getting straight to the point. If you want to encourage readers to invest in your characters' journeys, here are 2 key tips you don't want to miss. But first, we need to ask, do characters truly need to be relatable? Whether your character is a noble-hearted everyman, a thieving anti-hero, or a mustache-twirling villain who's somehow managed to snag the spotlight, if you want readers to invest in their journeys, your characters need to be relatable. Yes, even the most morally bankrupt of characters requires a shred of humanity if you want readers to buy into their stories. And that is exactly what makes a character relatable: their humanity. Forging the reader-character connection is all about encouraging readers to empathize with your characters in some way. For readers to extend empathy, they must recognize the humanity in your character's experiences or circumstances. In doing so, they'll come to understand your character's actions, even if they aren't always to be admired, and to care about your character's fates. With that established, one question remains. How can we craft characters with whom readers can empathize? So yes, here are my 2 tips for crafting relatable characters. There will always be readers who won't like your stories, who find your characters bland or insufferable, and so choose not to lose themselves in the pages of your book. This is okay. In fact, it's something all writers should keep in mind as they work to intentionally create connection between their readers and characters. Above all else, writers should focus on connecting with their ideal readers. Sometimes that reader is themselves, or some version of themselves. Other times that reader is their child, their best friend, their mother, their coworker, or that stranger they met on the street last week. Whatever the case, focusing on crafting characters whom your ideal reader is likely to find relatable is key to casting the hook that will keep those same readers, the ones who are most likely to champion your book, invested in your story. For more information on defining your ideal reader, I have an article linked for you in today's episode transcript at well-storied.com/relatable. Now, with your story's ideal reader in mind, here are my top 2 tips for crafting relatable characters whose stories your readers will jump at the chance to adore. Tip number 1, establish a relatable theme. Theme, you ask? What does theme have to do with crafting characters or creating connections with readers? In truth, quite a bit. Themes are merely topics that stories explore. As it happens, your character's journey likely centers around a specific theme, or 2, whether or not you've consciously built that theme into your story. Need a few examples? Common themes include grief, identity, adventure, power, love, and loss, among many others. Subsequently, each of these themes represents the foundation of a near universal human experience: a coming-of-age story, a first love, the loss of a loved one, the struggle to find agency or self-worth, and so on. Simply put, themes are human, relatable, and by choosing to consciously build your character's stories around themes your ideal readers have likely experienced for themselves, you increase the chances that those same readers will come to empathize with your characters and invest in their journeys. Humanizing the dark side. When it comes to anti-heroes and antagonists, or even heroic protagonists who've taken momentary dark turns, themes can be especially humanizing. Often it is a character's particular struggle with a rather human experience, grief, hurt, fear, jealousy, that drives them to negative action. By exploring this theme, the root source of your character's harmful behavior, you can encourage readers to understand and empathize with their choices, no matter how dark the actions or their consequences. Tip number 2, give them an emotional struggle. Fear and desire are, even more so than the many themes upon which you can hang your story, universal human experiences. They also happen to be the 2 ingredients necessary for some serious internal struggle, the most universal human experience of all. Fortunately, the specific fears and desires you give your characters don't have to be universal themselves in order for readers to care. Oftentimes, the simple remembrance of their own internal struggles is enough to invest readers in a character's journey. For more information on how to craft specific fears and desires that breed relatable internal conflict, don't miss our breakdown of the lie your character believes, which I have linked in today's episode transcript at well-storied.com/relatable. There is also an episode of the podcast that covers this same topic. It is episode number 31, and it is called How to Build Epic Emotional Conflict by Utilizing Your Character's Lie. A surefire way to kill your emotional connection. What would a struggle between fear and desire be without a few flaws thrown into the mix? Humans are deeply imperfect creatures, and so crafting characters that lack any substantial personality or behavioral flaws is a sure way to kill readers' belief in their humanity. An unbelievable character will always ruin a story faster than an unlikable one. So no matter how greatly you fear that readers won't adore your characters, resist the urge to give your characters only inconsequential flaws such as clumsiness or awkward behavior. In place of such near perfection, develop consequential flaws for your characters that add depth and realism to their internal struggles. In all likelihood, readers will identify with your character's shortcomings and find themselves all the more invested in their transformative journeys. As you can see, crafting relatable characters doesn't necessitate giving them specific personality traits or experiences or backstories that speak only to a few select readers. Generally speaking, readers enter stories wanting to be engaged. Thus, it often doesn't take much for readers to find themselves invested in the pages of a book. All they need is a real human character struggling with real human experiences that closely mirror their own bouts with fear, desire, and conflict-breeding flaws. Will every reader who picks up your book find your characters relatable and their journeys worth investing in? Not likely. But by identifying your ideal reader and working to tell a story designed just for them, I have no doubt that you'll hook readers in with a story that will stay with them long after they've reached the end. Writers, thank you so much for listening in to today's episode of the Well-Storied podcast. I personally believe that any good story is hinged on its characters, that without good, well-developed characters, you really don't have a story that readers are going to want to get invested in. And I also believe that relatable characters, as you can tell from today's episode, are really how you're going to hook readers in and make them care about your story, make them care about your characters and what happens to them, to their fate, and so on. And so I hope you gleaned some tips and tricks for crafting relatable characters and getting readers invested in your story today. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to listen in again and again, make sure to subscribe to the podcast from wherever you are listening in from. It also helps as well if you're able to leave a quick like, a rating, or a review. Anything that really helps gain the podcast more visibility goes a long way towards helping the podcast grow and keeps me creating these episodes. So anything you can do in that arena would be absolutely great. Thank you so much for your support there. Also, if you don't know, I do have a Patreon account for Well-Storied, and one of the things that the Patreon account helps support is this podcast. If you don't know, Patreon is simply a place where you can pledge a small amount each month to support some of your favorite creators. So if you're really enjoying the podcast and really enjoying all that I create for Well-Storied, make sure to head on over to patreon.com/well-storied to learn how you can help support the website and the podcast today. Again, writers, thank you so much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you guys very soon. Until then, happy writing. Bye, writers.